The frozen winds of the Siberian wilderness howled like a dying animal, sending flurries of snow twisting through the endless pines. Dr. Evelyn Carter gripped the metal handle of the snowmobile tighter, her fingers stiff in the cold, her breath fogging up her visor. The distress call had come through just after dawn. A rare white tiger, barely alive, had been spotted limping through the woods near a ranger station. The locals called it a ghost, a spirit that roamed the tundra, appearing only in moments of great change or great disaster. Evelyn didn't believe in folklore, she believed in science. But as she and her team of 3, tracker Nikolai Petrov, biologist Dr. Jake Lawson, and wildlife medic Alex Wu, cut through the harsh terrain, something felt wrong. Even Nikolai, a Russian tracker who had spent his life in the wilderness, was uneasy. He was usually the first to crack a joke on long missions, but today he was silent. Finally, he broke the tension. "The locals didn't want to come," he muttered. "Superstition," Evelyn replied, adjusting her goggles. Nikolai shook his head. "They say the tiger isn't sick. They say it's cursed, that it isn't just dying, it's changing." The radio crackled before Evelyn could respond. "Visual confirmed. We've got it," came the voice of one of the rangers ahead. Oh God, you need to see this for yourself." Evelyn's gut twisted. They reached the clearing minutes later, and the moment she saw it, she knew something was terribly, terribly wrong. The tiger lay motionless, its great body partially buried in the snow, its ribs rising and falling in uneven, shallow breaths. But its fur, once pristine white, was unrecognizable. Dark lesions like rotting wounds covered its body. Clusters of what looked like hardened barnacles grew from its skin in grotesque patches, pulsing slightly, as if something inside them was alive. The stench hit her first, not just the smell of rot, but something worse, an acrid metallic odor that made her eyes water. Alex knelt down to inspect, reaching out with gloved hands to gently part the tiger's matted fur. The moment he touched it, the growths twitched. The entire team jerked back as the tiger let out a weak, shuddering growl, its fevered golden eyes locking onto Evelyn's. And then they heard it, a strange clicking sound coming from the wounds themselves, like something inside was whispering, communicating. Jake, ever the skeptic, took a deep breath and muttered, "What the hell is this?" Evelyn swallowed, staring at the parasites embedded into the tiger's flesh. "I don't know," she whispered, "but we need to find out fast. Because whatever was inside that tiger, it wasn't done yet." The howling wind outside the ranger station rattled the windows as Dr. Evelyn Carter and her team rushed the half-dead white tiger onto the operating table. The tiger's ragged breathing filled the small emergency wildlife clinic, its massive body twitching as if something beneath its flesh was still moving. Evelyn's mind raced. This wasn't a normal infection. She had treated diseased wildlife before, seen injuries from poachers, frostbite, starvation. But this was something entirely different. The barnacle-like growths fused into the tiger's ribs pulsated as if they had a heartbeat of their own. Alex Wu, the team's wildlife medic, ran a gloved hand over the largest cluster, located on the tiger's shoulder. "Jesus," he muttered. "It's like it's growing on top of its nerves." Nikolai, standing by the door with his rifle slung across his chest, shook his head. Number not on its nerves, into them. Evelyn turned to Dr. Jake Lawson, the team's biologist. "Can you cut one of them off? We need to see what the hell we're dealing with." Jake hesitated. The strange clicking from the barnacles had grown louder, like tiny brittle fingers scraping together. The sound was starting to seep into his skull, making his thoughts feel sluggish, like he was listening to something that shouldn't be heard. "Jake," Evelyn repeated. He exhaled, grabbed a scalpel, and pressed the blade to the edge of one of the pulsating growths. The moment he made an incision, the tiger convulsed. A horrifying screech tore from its throat, its muscles seizing up as if electrocuted. And then, the parasites reacted. The barnacle-like clusters split open, releasing something that wriggled. Jake stumbled backward, nearly dropping the scalpel. The growths weren't barnacles, they were eggs. And inside them, tiny translucent creatures twisted and clawed, their underbellies pulsing with something dark and venomous. The eggs had been hatching inside the tiger. Evelyn moved fast, grabbing a syringe and jamming it into the tiger's bloodstream, administering a high dose of sedatives. The animal slumped, its body still writhing involuntarily. Alex looked up, eyes wide. "Evelyn, we have to get these things off now." She nodded, grabbing a scalpel and surgical clamps. The first cut was the hardest. As she peeled back the rotting, infected tissue, the parasites beneath the surface squirmed violently, their tiny legs twitching as they lost their grip on the tiger's nerves. Jake, regaining his composure, grabbed a scalpel and joined in, carefully slicing deep beneath the parasite nests. Each incision released a foul-smelling black liquid, a mixture of pus and some unknown toxin that burned through their gloves. "What the hell kind of parasite is this?" Alex whispered. Evelyn shook her head, fear curling in her stomach. Because these parasites weren't just feeding on the tiger's body, they were trying to control it. And then, the clinic lights flickered. A low, unnatural sound echoed from outside. Something was out there. Nikolai immediately unslung his rifle, eyes scanning the shadows beyond the frosted window. "Evelyn," he called, voice tense. "We are not alone." A heavy thud hit the side of the building, then another. Jake stepped closer to the door. "What is that?" Nikolai turned, eyes grim. "I think it's another one." Evelyn's heart pounded. If there was another infected tiger out there, they weren't just dealing with a disease. They were dealing with something spreading. The thudding against the walls of the clinic grew louder, sending tremors through the floor. Something massive was out there. Nikolai tightened his grip on his rifle, his breath visible in the freezing air. Evelyn's pulse pounded in her ears. They weren't ready for this. They were supposed to be rescuing one sick tiger, not facing down whatever was outside that door. The clinic lights flickered again, the old generator struggling under the weight of the storm and the chaos unfolding inside. Then, a deep, guttural growl vibrated through the walls. Evelyn's fingers trembled as she reached for the tranquilizer gun on the counter. Another infected tiger. It had to be. But then Alex froze, his voice barely above a whisper. "Evelyn, look at the one on the table." She turned, and her stomach dropped. The white tiger they had been operating on, the one sedated, near death just moments ago, was standing. Its pupils were fully dilated, its breathing slow, deliberate, and its movements were unnatural. Jake stumbled back. "That's not possible. It should be unconscious for hours." But the tiger's limbs twitched, its muscles rolling like something under its skin was trying to control it. The parasites they had cut away, they had only removed the surface layer. Whatever was inside was still there. The growl outside grew closer. Then the door handle rattled. Someone, something was trying to get in. Evelyn's breathing turned shallow, panicked. Her mind raced. If they let it in, they could all die. But if they stayed locked in with a tiger that was changing before their eyes, they might not have a choice. The windows cracked, a massive force slamming against the side of the clinic. Then, the power cut out completely. The clinic was swallowed in pitch blackness. For a moment, all they could hear was the ragged breathing of the tiger. And then, it turned its head toward them. The clicking started again. But this time, the sound wasn't coming from its wounds. It was coming from its throat, like the parasites were speaking through it. Jake grabbed Evelyn's arm, his voice hoarse. "Evelyn, we need to run." But it was too late. Because the door exploded inward, the door burst open, sending a shower of splinters across the dark clinic. The freezing wind rushed inside, carrying with it the metallic stench of rotting flesh. Nikolai fired first. The shot rang out, the muzzle flash illuminating the grotesque figure standing in the doorway. Another tiger. But this one was fully overtaken. Its once magnificent white fur was blackened with infection, the parasites covering its body in thick, pulsating clusters. Its jaws were slack, hanging unnaturally, and its eyes, no longer golden, were solid, bottomless pits. And worse, it didn't flinch when the bullet hit it. It moved anyway, fast, too fast. It lunged at Nikolai, knocking him hard into the counter, sending medical supplies crashing to the floor. The tiger they had been operating on twitched violently, then turned toward them, clicking and convulsing. The parasites weren't just inside it, they were controlling it. Evelyn grabbed a scalpel and a syringe of adrenaline, her heart hammering. If the parasites were sending signals through the nervous system, Then maybe they could disrupt them. Maybe there was still time. But Jake had another idea. Burn it. His voice was cold, decisive. Evelyn hesitated, horror clawing up her throat. What? We have to burn them out. Jake's eyes were wild, desperate. If these things spread, we're all dead. The tiger on the table convulsed again, and for one split second, Evelyn saw something, a shadow moving beneath its skin. It was no longer an animal, it was a host. Alex grabbed the kerosene canister from the storage cabinet, his face pale. We have to make a choice, now. The infected tiger in the doorway snarled, its elongated limbs twitching, adjusting. The one on the table moved first, and Evelyn made her decision. She threw the scalpel away and grabbed the kerosene. Nikolai recovered just in time to pull the flare from his belt. The moment the fire ignited, the parasites reacted violently. The screeching filled the room, an inhuman, unnatural sound, like thousands of brittle legs scraping together in protest. The tiger on the table bucked once, then collapsed. The one in the doorway shrieked, flailing, the parasites bursting from its flesh like smoke escaping a fire. It stumbled backward, blind, panicked, and then it ran right into the frozen wilderness. And then there was silence. Evelyn coughed, covering her mouth against the stench of burnt fur and rotting parasites. Her hands shook violently. Jake exhaled, staring at the burnt remains of the first tiger. His knuckles were white, his entire body trembling. Nikolai lowered his gun but didn't speak. Finally, Alex whispered, "What the hell did we just kill?" Evelyn wiped soot from her face, her breath coming in short, shallow bursts. They hadn't just saved the tiger, they had stopped something far worse from escaping into the world. But it wasn't over, because somewhere, deep in the Siberian wilderness, one infected tiger was still running. And it wasn't running away. It was looking for something else to infect.